to flee. Millions of men, women, and children are far from home, seeking refuge from violence and instability on foreign soil. For this year's World Refugee Day, a special edition of Home with Isha Sesay focused on the plight of the displaced. We're speaking to refugees from around the globe about their day-to-day lives and how the coronavirus pandemic is impacting their dreams for the future. Plus, a conversation with a top official from the UN Agency for Refugees about their just-released annual Global Trends report. What does it reveal about refugee movements? And when it comes to supporting the world's most vulnerable, which countries are stepping up and who's falling back? And cracking the code to success, we'll bring you the story of Lual Mayan. Once upon a time, he was a refugee in Uganda. Today, he's the CEO of his very own video gaming company in Washington, D.C. That incredible story of overcoming and so much more coming up. Let's get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this special edition of the show. This Saturday, June 20th, is World Refugee Day, a time for us to pause, to remember some of the world's most vulnerable and the challenges that they face, the struggles they endure every single day. But for those who are displaced, forced far from home, there is no pause to those struggles. Every day is filled with hardship and deprivation. We want to take a closer look at what they are facing and what life is like for the millions of people who endure such an existence. And sadly, the numbers are only growing. We have just gotten in the latest figures from UNHCR, and quite frankly, they are shocking. See for yourself. Tales of unimaginable horror. But for Renata, sharing these stories is essential for recovery, and she's doing all she can to help these women with their healing. For this mother of five, providing comfort is about far more than simply being a good Samaritan to her neighbors. It's also about giving back. Because like these women, Renata is also a victim of conflict. Not too long ago, she was driven away from her home in northern Burkina Faso by armed men who killed her relatives. Today, Renata calls the small town of Kaya in Burkina Faso her home. Sadly, these stories of violence and displacement are all too common. According to UNHCR, at the end of April this year, there were roughly 848,000 internally displaced people in Burkina Faso.
This is a humanitarian emergency of big proportions. These people are basically have nothing.
From January 2019 to April 20, the number of those internally displaced in this poor West African nation increased more than 16-fold.
Truly shocked. We have here a displaced population, by the way, mostly women and children, fleeing after having gone through the most horrifying violence. Killing of men and of boys by these armed groups that are arriving in the night in the villages, and the women are obliged to flee, often alone, with no means.
But such chaos is not limited to Africa. By the end of 2019, worldwide, a whopping 79.5 million people had been forcibly displaced, the highest total ever recorded by UNHCR. 29.6 million of them were refugees, and more than half under the age of 18. And the country currently hosting the most refugees? Turkey, followed by Colombia, Pakistan, Uganda, and Germany. In the last decade, there were more than 16.2 million asylum applications registered. 2 million of them were received in 2019 alone.
Corona, corona, corona.
Now, fast forward to today and the appearance of the novel coronavirus, which has brought parts of the world to a complete standstill. Most governments are urging people to stay home, wash their hands frequently, and practice social distancing. But what if this was your home?
I knew that it was difficult for these practices to be implemented sincerely, because considering the time, But however, because I knew also if we don't do it, then it will be difficult it will expose also the population into a risk.
Fears of an outbreak became a reality last month when the virus was discovered in a refugee camp in Juba, South Sudan. Since then, UNHCR has been working overtime to limit the spread.
We are here in the front line to ensure that refugee safety is ensured, and also they receive their entitlement in a dignified manner. But of course, we still believe that there is a big population in the community who are not yet to grasp the message, and that's why we need to continue advocating for the health and safety measures to be actually reinforced or implemented by the refugees themselves.
Yeah. And many are doing just that. These Malian women in this camp in Niger are making masks to help fight the disease. In a different camp on the other side of the world, the stakes are just as high.
This is one of the most crowded places on earth, with over 859,000 refugees living in very, very close quarters.
The Kutupalong refugee settlement in Bangladesh is the largest refugee camp in the world. More than 600,000 of its inhabitants are Rohingya refugees who fled from neighboring Myanmar. Here too, it's an all-hands-on-deck effort.
We, for example, trained 1,200 community health workers to spread messages on hygiene prevention, on what is COVID, what are signs and symptoms, how can you prevent it as a family, and how can social distancing contribute.
To date, there's been only one confirmed death at Kutupalong, but coronavirus is just one of several threats facing those forced from their homes. UNHCR says more than 1% of humanity is now displaced, a staggering statistic, and one which demands that, like Renata, everyone, everywhere, steps up to do their part to help the world's most vulnerable. Think about that for a second. 79.5 million people forcibly displaced, the largest number that UNHCR says they have ever seen. Well, joining us now to talk about the worsening situation is Gillian Triggs. She's the Assistant High Commissioner for Protection at the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. She joins us now from Geneva. Gillian, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Gillian, these numbers are almost too hard to comprehend. I mean, we've gone up from 70.8 million to 79.5 million displaced. That was the number recorded at the end of 2019. What's behind the rise?
It's interesting, actually, that the rise reflects something that's been going on for many, many years. The refugees and those displaced within their own country are rising in countries where we've had conflicts for many years. They are long-standing. They're not short-term, where we can hope that people will go home, as most refugees and displaced people want. We're now seeing horrific humanitarian tragedies over many years in Yemen, in Syria, in Venezuela, in Burkina Faso. And so the not only have the numbers so horrifically become larger, so much larger. The previous year's reporting was 71 million. Now we're nearly 80 million. Next year, I fear. What I think is happening is not only the numbers, but the intensity of these situations that are not improving, and they're actually worsening.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. I do want to just, underscore what you just said, that UNHCR is seeing fewer and fewer people able to return home, which begs the question, what's the long-term solution here?
Well, you're asking the right question. And there's a little bit of positivism that I can give you this evening, because literally in the last few hours, it's become possible to start resettlement programs again. Unfortunately, resettlement positions are declining and they have done over many, many years. That's the first point. The second is, as I suggested earlier, these situations are protracted for years. Turkey has hosted, with extraordinary generosity, patience and inclusion, nearly 4 million refugees, largely, of course, from Syria. But there's no hope for them because they cannot go home to safety and dignity. And so we have a protracted environment in which generosity is extended by neighbouring states, but where it's become impossible to send people home. So where we are at UNHCR, we of course are identified with trying to resettle people in safety, encouraging and helping people to return. And both of those are areas of declining opportunity. So where we are left with is the third option for us, and that is to encourage inclusion in the societies in which people find themselves. Now, your video has displayed, of course, that many people are in camps, but in reality, actually, most people are in urban areas where they're trying to find a living. And so where we see in the short term an opportunity is to encourage countries, often neighbouring countries, often as poor or sometimes middle income, as Turkey obviously is, but often poor. We're encouraging donors, the business community, civil society, refugees themselves to work to encourage self-sufficiency and inclusion in the societies in which they are. So education for the children, access to health services, and many, many countries are coming up to the mark on that, but many are not. And that is the challenge for UNHCR and for the community. So it's a very mixed picture, but in the short term, at least, we only see real opportunities by urging inclusion in society. And that really is the message in a globalized environment.
Indeed. Every country has to do its part right now. Gillian Triggs, Assistant High Commissioner for Protection, joining us there from Geneva. We appreciate your time and your insights. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
It's a tremendous figure just to even try to comprehend. As you look at it, 79.5 million people displaced at the end of 2019. We turn our attention now to Kenya, where more than 200,000 people call the Dadaab refugee complex home. Over the years, the population in this camp has fluctuated, but one thing has remained constant: hardship. We have the story now of one woman, as told by a special correspondent, Timothy Otieno. He brings us the story of a woman who's actually living beyond the camp, just as Gillian was talking about there, a woman who's displaced, but not living in a camp, but living in an urban area. And she's trying to hold on to her dreams for a brighter tomorrow.
23-year-old Isha Sesay prepares black tea for her 3 children. It's the only meal they're likely to have today. Isha moved to Nairobi 5 years ago, having relocated from the Kakuma refugee camp, where she grew up from after her parents fled ethnic violence in Somalia in 2005. But the promise of a better life in Nairobi has been anything but. Her house has no electricity, and she's 3 months late on her rent. The ongoing coronavirus pandemic, coupled with the fact that Isha is yet to get any valid work permit, means she's now part of a growing statistic of unemployed youth in this country. Isha forms part of the 13% of the total refugees in Kenya who live in urban areas like Nairobi. A huge bulk of the refugees still remain at the Dadaab and Kakuma camps in northern Kenya, where, according to the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, a majority of them come from Somalia.
There is a present number of Kenyans who are in the camp. There is foreigners who are not necessarily Somalis who are in this camp. There are those of Somalis who have been given an opportunity in process for resettlement.
5 years ago, the Kenyan government announced plans to gradually close down Dadaab, which has been in existence for 29 years. A process of repatriating a majority of the refugees back to their countries of origin began in earnest.
When the government spoke about the camps, the closure of the camps, the numbers significantly increased, and we have so many people coming to report at the return help desk for return.
It's an exercise that has seen 84,230, mostly Somalis, take part in the voluntary return exercise by January of this year. But not everyone is willing to go back home.
Where
I came from, I flee from, there's no peace still. They are controlled by militias, so it will be very difficult for me to come back.
However, the numbers at both camps has tremendously gone down over the last decade, with only about 238,000 refugees still living in camps across Kenya. And even those refugees who choose to remain aren't guaranteed any peace. Locals in Kenya's northern towns have often decried the existence of the camps, claiming that the refugees are taking up jobs at the expense of the indigenous community here. But for Aisha, life at the camp may as well be way better than that at the city, and her dreams for a better life as a refugee in Kenya at the moment will remain just a mirage.
Alikuwa nataka kurudi, hata nimekosa tikiti ya kurudi na huko.
Ulikuwa unataka kurudi wapi?
Kakuma.
Kwa nini?
Si niko na kitu yangu huko, sende watu wananipigia simu. Ananiambia kuja huko. Ukae huko maisha ni mzuri, hata watoto shule nasoma bure, hawezi lipa pesa.
For Home with Isha Sesay, I am Timothy Otieno.
Oh, thanks to Timothy for that special report. We wanted to bring you a closer look now at life in Dadaab, this sprawling camp set amid semi-arid land in Kenya's north. So we sat down with a man, a school teacher, Mark Okello-Oyat, who has called this place home for more than 2 decades. Mark Okello-Oyat joins us now from Dadaab, Kenya. Mark, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm very grateful and delighted for inviting me.
The pleasure is ours. Mark, you have been in the Dadaab refugee community for well over 20 years. Talk to us about what life was like in Dadaab before COVID appeared.
Okay, thank you so much. Before COVID-19, life in Dadaab was okay in that social distancing was not there, and people were not scared of their neighbors as it is of now. At the moment, whenever you see anybody, you feel unsafe, and the other person also feels unsafe from you. So that issue has now been created.
Are you getting enough humanitarian assistance?
Okay, at the moment, when we talk of humanitarian assistance, it is really limited. There's already strain of resources. We have challenges in which even the national staff have been told they have been restricted from coming to the camp itself. There's limitation of movement, and therefore it means now the refugees have to work very hard, because we only meet with them during in virtual platforms like WhatsApp maybe Zoom things to do like that. But real going to the offices and meeting the officials is not easy.
And I know that you are chairman of one of the committees that is speaking out for those in the community. For you, in terms of your greatest need right now, what is the greatest need for those living in Dadaab at this present moment?
Okay, the greatest need at the moment, as I've explained, we need support in issues to do with protection needs like water, food. We need shelter, and basic education is also very important.
Your message to the world. What do you want people to know about this moment? What is it that you want people to do for people like yourself who are in a place like Dadaab?
My message is that we are confined. Refugees are vulnerable people in this precarious stage of time where we are locked down in the issue of COVID-19. We need the international support to support us holistically, whereby I mean that we need shelter, we need food, we need water, we need education more than ever before at this high time, so that the children that are kept at home are kept busy. So we want support from the international community to realize that we are also a part of the international citizenship. People who need support, people who need to be supported at this critical time for survival. And so that also we are able to fight against this COVID-19 with enough vigor and strength.
Thank you so much for speaking to us today. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
I just want to say thank you again to Marco Kello Oyat for speaking to us and giving us some insight into life there in Dadaab. Well, we turn from Dadaab in Kenya to the Kutupalong settlement in Bangladesh. This is a place that is home to about 600,000 Rohingya refugees. It is now the largest settlement in the world. And the Rohingya are a people that have a long history of being victims of violence and discrimination. You may remember back in 2017 when there was another explosion of violence. They've long experienced this, I should say, in neighboring Myanmar. And back in 2017, there was another outbreak, if you will, and what emerged with these tales of killings and sexual assault, and it forced tens of thousands of Rohingya over the border to Bangladesh. Well, life in Bangladesh has not been much easier for the Rohingya, and as they picture a future, the challenges on the horizon are increasing rather than decreasing. We want to get more on the plight of the Rohingya, and we're joined now by an old friend of mine and a senior correspondent with Al Jazeera English, Mohammed Jamjoom, who has been covering the plight of the Rohingya, the plight of the stateless people for many, many years. And Mohammed joins us now from Doha. Mohammed, my friend, welcome.
Hey, Aisha, thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it. It's nice to talk to you.
It's very nice to talk to you. As I was just sharing with our viewers, you have been covering the difficult life for Rohingyas for many, many years. What's the situation now as they find themselves in the Kutupalong refugee settlement? As we talk about COVID, how great is the threat posed to them? Has it spread further since we last got data?
Sure, Aisha. Well, let me tell you first, the latest numbers we've heard as far as the spread of COVID-19 inside the camps. This is according to UNHCR Bangladesh. I was told earlier today there are now 39 confirmed cases among the Rohingya refugee population. There are 3 deaths among the refugee population. When you consider the fact that over the course of the past few months, many health experts, many aid workers have said that conditions in those informal settlements in Bangladesh are so dire that COVID-19 could potentially spread like wildfire, you look at those numbers that I just mentioned and you think, oh, well, maybe things are going better than people had anticipated. But then you must remember that this is a population of close to 1 million refugees. You're talking about approximately 100,000 people for every square mile in those camps. It is so dense. So this is an area where you cannot social distance. It's very difficult for the refugees to practice the kind of hygiene that would enable them to really effectively prevent the spread of the coronavirus. This is a place where sanitation has always been an issue. And many of the aid workers that I continue to speak with say they believe the numbers are so low because probably there are cases that are unaccounted for. Let me bring you back to that number once again of close to 1 million refugees that are in those informal settlements. Out of that population of nearly 1 million people, there's been only 432 tests, 432 COVID-19 tests administered thus far.
So, I mean, taking that number and looking at it, there is no clear sense of what COVID is doing in this population. There's just no way to know with only a couple of hundred tests. What do the Rohingya you've been able to speak to, what do they tell you about their fears at this time? And just generally, put that in context with the life and the struggles that they endure day to day.
I will tell you, Aisha, first and foremost, that in my career as a journalist, I have never encountered the kinds of descriptions of atrocities committed against the population as I did when I first started going to Rohingya refugee camps, collecting testimonies, interviewing refugees. What they suffered at the hands of Myanmar's military is the kind of brutality that even when you hear about it, it's just hard to wrap your brain around it. It's hard to understand how somebody can put somebody else through something like that, something so horrific. This is a very traumatized population. They have faced obstacle after obstacle after obstacle. Now they find themselves in these camps. They are stateless. This is one of the world's most persecuted minorities. This is one of the most vulnerable populations in the world right now. And all of a sudden in the past few months, with everything that they've been through, they are faced with a kind of threat that they've never faced before. That's COVID-19. Now, they're also an extremely resilient population. I speak to refugees there all the time. They are engaged in supporting groups like UNHCR and other aid agencies. They're really the backbone of the aid efforts there. They try as much as they can to help the community, to spread awareness about how to prevent COVID-19 spreading further. They have an obstacle in their way right now in the form of an internet shutdown. The internet has been largely shut down in and around the camps by the government of Bangladesh since approximately September of last year. This is something that so many aid agencies have urged the Bangladesh government to reverse, to bring the internet back on in those camps, because when the refugee population is cut off from the internet, it means they can't get information about cyclones and monsoons heading their way. Even today, there's flash flooding going on in those camps because it's cyclone season. It makes it very hard for them to get accurate information about COVID-19. And despite all that, you have youth activists there. You have members of the community that are coming together. They're going door to door, spreading information, trying to make sure people know how to properly wash their hands, trying to encourage people to socially distance as much as they can, and just trying to make sure that they have the latest information they need so that the situation, which is so dangerous for them right now, gets just a little less dangerous.
Mohammed Jamjoom, I can't thank you enough for being able to bring us the stories of the Rohingya and really drive home all that they are enduring. Thank you for joining us from Doha, Mohammed Jamjoom, senior correspondent with Al Jazeera English. We appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you, my friend. Appreciate it.
See you soon.
Thank you.
The Rohingya continue to go through so much. As Mohammed was just saying, one of the world's most persecuted people. I want to bring you a story of overcoming now. 28-year-old Dr. Salima Rehman is no stranger to being cut off from home and a foreigner in a new land, being an outsider. Her struggles have been numerous, and yet she has met each and every challenge and she has overcome. And she's now the first female Turkmen doctor in Pakistan. During this pandemic, she remains on the front lines. She continues to do the work, helping everyone she can, despite the personal risks. We spoke to her a little bit earlier, and she explained what the achievement means and what's driving her on. Dr. Salima Rahman joins us now from Rawalpindi, Pakistan. Dr. Rahman, welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Isha. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. You're a refugee doctor working in Pakistan. You are the first Turkmen refugee doctor from your community. It is a huge achievement. First of all, talk to me about what you are encountering right now on the front lines as you deal with patients during this coronavirus pandemic.
Yeah, we are working as frontliners because most of the people are self-isolating at their homes, but we doctors are serving humanity, and I feel so proud to serve and to treat them. Most of the general population and refugees visit Holy Family Hospital for their treatment, and during this COVID crisis, we educate them. We try to make awareness about sanitization, proper hand washing techniques, and to wear mask, and social distancing and home isolation. We educate them, and we try to treat them as much as we can do for them, for their betterment. And I'm working as gynecologist, so I deal with the pregnant ladies and care for their babies, for their safe delivery. And but this COVID and Corona crisis has not let me to stop my duty, and I am continuing my duty, and I feel proud to help all these ladies during this crisis.
Dr. Rahman, what's your greatest concern as you watch the situation unfold?
My greatest concern is my patients, that if they don't get the because most of them are living below the poverty line, so COVID is affecting them as whole. They are having lack of facilities and resources, especially in this COVID pandemic, and their health is being affected by this COVID. So I think that there should be enough resources for them so that their health, especially physical and mental, both don't get affected in future. So for me, my patients' health is my priority, and I fear about them, that they don't get more affected by the pandemic.
And as you talk about the need for more resources, just what is your assessment in terms of the amount of support refugee communities are getting at a time like this, given the fact that they're already living in such difficult conditions? Has that support increased?
The support should be increased, because in future they will face a lot of troubles, because most of them are daily wagers and they depend on their daily income. Due to the lockdown and isolation, many of them are not being able to earn, and their condition is much more bad as it seemed to be.
And finally, you know, I said at the beginning of this conversation that you're the first ever female Turkmen refugee doctor in Pakistan. What does it mean to you to be able to be serving your community and so many more people, particularly at a time like this? What does it mean to you personally?
I just feel proud, and my father is also proud. My family is proud that I am playing my part, for being first one from my communities, Turkmen community, and as being Afghan refugee. It's just an honor for me that I am able to serve not only my community, Turkmen community, where there is a language barrier, due to which they don't get any consultation from their host country, where they feel difficulty in communication, where I'm working as a communicator and translator, and they prefer to contact me. I'm just not only doing this for my community, but also for my host country, and this makes me feel proud that I am doing for all of them.
Yeah, it's important work that you're doing. Dr. Salima Rahman, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you.
That's an honor and my pleasure to meet you.
Dr. Rahman is quite simply an inspiration. Now, pause for a moment and imagine spending your entire life in a refugee camp. That is the story of my next guest, SAFIA Ibrahimkil. She was actually born and raised in an Afghan refugee camp there in Pakistan. So just like Dr. Salima Rahman, Pakistan is also her home. And this young woman is a force of nature, and she's now using her voice to advocate for other women and girls who face a similar existence to that of her own. She is raising her voice to call for greater access to opportunity for them, because as she explained to me a little bit earlier, they deserve so much more. SAFIA Ibrahimkil joins us now from Peshawar, Pakistan. SAFIA, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
You're most welcome. SAFIA, you were born and raised in an Afghan refugee camp there in Pakistan. Can you just explain to our viewers what that experience was like growing up in this kind of environment?
Well, when civil war erupted in Afghanistan and my family fled from Afghanistan and they came to Pakistan, they lived in a refugee camp which was based in Peshawar. After 2 years, I was born in a refugee camp in a tent, and my family members, we all were just living in one tent. And then slowly and gradually, when I was 5 years old, I got admission in school. And that school was also based in a refugee tent, and it was muddy classes made of mud. And I think that was the experience. There are refugees who are living in refugees camp and experiencing that life. And I think I am also reflecting that the story of million refugees. I think that was a struggle. That's the struggle that made me who I am today, and that is the struggle. That was the experience that pushed me to work for my people, to work for my community, to work for people who are voiceless.
What do you think the international community gets wrong when it comes to their engagement specifically on issues regarding girls and women?
I think there is still a stereotype related to women. If just I talk about my community, as I say, they are thinking that women should be at home, she belongs to home. But still there, I think it is not just about the conservative community, democratic community. There are still some narratives and perspective about women around the world, that women don't have capability to work in some career in some nationals. I think that is the thing that now people should work on their policy and strategy to change that narrative, to change that perspective, that women has equal skill, talent as men have. And there are some kind of projects related to women that I think that is not just enough to provide vocational training or literacy or education to women. There are a lot of things to do for women. She should be involved in this building process. She should be involved in policy making and decision making and strategy making. So these are a lot of things that, and I'm very happy that I had this opportunity to and present younger voices and young women voices in global level, and share that my experience and put my ideas forward to work for women, and especially for refugee women.
And finally, I know that the life of many, as you're painting yourself, for many in camps, the life of many women and girls who are displaced is a difficult one. How are you encouraging those around you to stay positive, to be hopeful for the future, and to keep their dreams alive?
Well, I think everyone has a kind of fear if it's in personal or if it's community. So when I step back and when I start working in advocating for women rights and for young girls' education, I have faced a lot of challenges, but I never gave up. I was believing on my voice. I was believing in myself that I will change something positive. And there is also the fact that we can't change everything, but at least we can fix something. We can make it some opportunities and pathways for women to come forward and be the part of the discussion and decision which impact her life.
Well, Safia, we thank you for the work that you are doing. You are an important voice for so many in your community. Thank you for joining us to share your story today. Stay safe.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity to share my story and experience for the world.
Safia is a young woman who is making a difference for so many. Have you ever stopped long enough to ask yourself, who is a refugee? We have so many ideas around the idea of refugees and so many notions, but have you ever asked yourself that question? We decided to do just that and speak to some people in Kenya and Liberia. Here's what they had to say.
A refugee is a person who has run away from his or her country due to political or social instability, and they are now seeking refuge in another country which is safer and which is also willing to accommodate them during that period.
A person who comes from outside, someone who has no place to live.
When I hear of the word refugee, what comes to my mind is these are people who have been displaced from their countries of origins, and they have been forced to cross national boundaries, and they cannot be able to return to their homes safely because of either war, political violence, and even fear of being prosecuted.
I was a refugee in the Ivory Coast, where a refugee is someone who has fled his home country to seek safety in another person's country. And while you are there, you are being governed by the UN, basically, where you receive food rations and all of things, clothing, medication, education from the UN. And then if I think about being a refugee, I think about leaving behind all of my basic rights in my own home country, wherein I start to adapt to a new way of life in a strange land.
Well, it's our hope that this show will help reshape many of the ideas you have about who is a refugee. And I want to say thank you to everyone who is tuned in and is watching this special show. I see your comments, I see you writing in, and I just want to say thank you for each and every message. We appreciate you, particularly for this very special show that means so much to us. Now, we feel that as we mark this World Refugee Day, it's really important that you hear directly from young people. And you hear directly from young young people who are challenging stereotypes. So we want to tell you about another young man, a young man who's doing incredible things. At just 28 years old, Siddiqui Bamparaniza is helping young people who call a camp home to aim higher, to reimagine what is possible in life. He is helping them build a path towards attending higher education. He is providing invaluable mentoring, and he's doing so much more. Here's his story. Siddiqui Bamparaniza joins us now from Kigali, Rwanda. Siddiqui, welcome.
Thank you very much for hosting me here.
You're most welcome. You left the DRC for a refugee camp in Rwanda back in 1996. What is it about your experience of living in a refugee camp that made you want to use your voice as an advocate for your community?
Yeah. As I have left my country when I was very young, I was 4 years, and I have struggled a lot with accessing a quality education, and also seeing other refugee students, other young refugees struggling with accessing education and also accessing a high quality health care. So I would recommend that, like, I would advocate for health care for refugees and also access to high quality education.
And how are those efforts going? I mean, specifically your efforts to get more young refugee kids into higher education. Talk to me about that work you're doing.
Yeah, thank you. Today I work as a refugee college guidance counselor with Kepler. When I was young, I have had a chance to be supported by the Jesuit refugee service to access primary education and secondary school. But when I finished the high school, it was very hard for me to access higher education. And then I waited for an opportunity which came from Southern New Hampshire University program, which is in Rwanda, as Kepler. And then I accessed the education from Kepler. And then when I finished the high school, I was not having any hope that I would be having access to higher education, despite like any amount of scores I should be having from my high school examination, because refugees were not having access to higher education. Despite, like, I should have like one person to support me financially. If not, I could not have access to higher education. Then I finished my high school in 2011, and then I accessed the higher education in 2015.
What is it that you want people to know? What is it that they need to be doing to help scale up opportunities for young refugee students?
Thank you very much for this good question. I can advocate for the increase in accessing blended learning and online learning opportunities for refugee students in Kiziba refugee camp, because today we have only one education institution in the Kiziba refugee camp who can support refugee students to have access to higher education online. And you see, with the effects of coronavirus, COVID-19, people are now forced to work from home and also to keep social distancing, and we don't know when this will end. And also it's a projection of what will be happening in the future. And then, for example, Kepler takes only 50 refugees per year. And you see all other refugee students or other refugee high school graduates don't have access to online learning. So I would advocate that refugee students can have access to computers, connectivity, so that they can face the world and also have access to online learning.
And before I let you go, what keeps you going? What keeps your hope alive? You talk about writing songs with a message of hope, but what keeps your hope alive?
What keeps my hope alive is I see change. When I arrived in the camp, I was very young, and I had a chance to grow up and I became a great man like I am. And though I'm not at the point where I need to reach, but I see change, and I see how life has been generous, or how partners also have been generous to give me the opportunities to study, to learn, and I can think as an intellectual person, and I can see I have to work hard so that I support others instead of being self-centered. And I have hope that if everyone can have empathy for refugees, everyone can see everyone counts, refugees also count, and we can also give a contribution to the development of the world. We don't need to be rejected. And also we should be these kind of big men in our own land, but because of the border system created by the humans, we are not able to live where we are free to do whatever we want. We need opportunities to show the world that we are able.
Well, you're an inspiring voice, Siddiqui, and I know that you're affecting change around you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing your story and for having the kind of spirit that you have that is lifting others up. Thank you.
Thank you too.
The story of going full circle and giving back there. Now, Barbara Hendricks is a world-renowned opera singer with the voice of an angel, but it's her work off stage that really deserves acclaim. She has been a Goodwill Ambassador for 33 years, making her UNHCR's longest Goodwill Ambassador. This is a woman who has been fundraising and doing all she can to raise awareness of the plight of refugees at the highest levels of government and in the worlds of diplomacy, trying to do more. And as a result of all of this work, UNHCR has made her an honorary lifetime Goodwill Ambassador, a role that is much deserved. She has some special words to share for this World Refugee Day.
I'm Barbara Hendricks, and I have been a Goodwill Ambassador for UNHCR for more than 30 years. The first time I visited a refugee camp, and I met refugees and my colleagues working for UNHCR, I was taken by the refugee cause, about the necessity of the refugee cause, which is really based in protection of human rights. And since I believe that the defense and promotion of human rights is the duty of every citizen, it gave me the possibility of putting that belief into action. I think if you want to help a refugee, the first thing I think is important is you must see them as people. You must see them as your friend at the office, like you see your neighbor. And then when you're able to offer them help that they want, just a gesture of friendship, of volunteering with organizations that help refugees, teaching a language or skill that you may have. If you're able to employ a refugee or to help them to get employment, also be aware of fundraising events. And if you have the possibility, donate, because refugees are in need of the most fundamental essentials in their lives. Now during this COVID-19 pandemic, they are unable to do social distancing, have limited access to water and to soap. And so everything you give, every jest counts. And every jest of kindness is always rewarded, I believe, with the warmth of human kindness in return.
Barbara Hendricks, a refugee advocate for 33 years. Now, our final guest has long believed that just reading or hearing from refugees could only provide a limited insight into their experiences. So this young man decided to take things one step further, and he actually created a video game so that people could actually experience the reality of refugees. But long before Lual Mayen's life was full of the glitz of the tech industry, it was basically made up of the challenges that come with living in a refugee camp. And that's where he got his hands on his first computer. And with that computer, with that device, a whole new world opened up to him. He shared some of his incredible story with me just a short time ago. Lual Mayen joins me now from Washington, D.C. Lual, welcome.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to join today.
It's really good to have you here with us. Listen, you have such an incredible story that is inspirational to so many people, including myself. I want to start at the beginning, though, to give people context of the journey that you've made. You, for most of your young life, were living in a refugee camp in Uganda. How did you end up there?
Yeah, because of the violence that occurred in South Sudan. You know, it's a violence that actually it started a long time ago when my parents asked to flee the country to find a place of refuge, and they ended up in northern Uganda. It took them really a long way for them because as they were fleeing, that's why I was actually born on the way, as my family was actually fleeing the country during the war, and then we resettled in Uganda, and then. To us, it was not an easy journey for them, especially when my mother, she would tell me every time, just how hard the journey was for her, because when the war broke out for them to flee the country, I wasn't born yet. So, and then my other sisters were with my mother. Then my father had to take a different road. So my mother had to take care of the children on the way. And as they were actually moving towards to find a place of refuge, I was born on the way. So it wasn't an easy journey for them. They just all they wanted was to find a place where they can be able to start life, and and be able to find a better place for them, because these are people that they didn't just wake up in the morning and live what they love. They were farmers. They had everything. Their life was better, but because of the war, they had to find a way. Even for them, they didn't even know where they were going. They didn't even know that they were going to Uganda or anything. They were just moving along the way, just finding a way where they can be able to settle, and settle in northern Uganda.
And do you have particular memories that stay with you from life as a refugee in Uganda? Is there one particular memory that you find your mind going back to?
There's a lot. As someone who was growing there, a lot of people think that living in a refugee camp is a temporary thing, where you're going there for 3 years and leave the next 5 years. It was a permanent home for me. It was a place where I started my childhood growing up, and everything I did was in a refugee camp. And some of the memories, they are good memories. They are memories that, feel like, you would never, achieve anything in life, and there's a kind of memories. And growing up in a refugee camp, there were a lot of challenges. There was no better education. There was no quality of food. There was no quality of, water for you to drink. It was just this kind of life where nobody deserved to be there. But for us, as someone who was growing up there, that was the only home that I knew. A place that I was welcome to, and I had to utilize everything that I had there. I remember we went to find some, fruits like a mango fruit sometime. And one of my friends fell on a mango tree and he died on the spot. And the next thing I did the next day, I went back to the same mango tree to find something to eat. Because for me it was like I really wanted something to eat. I did not care whether it's dangerous or not. So all these refugees are fighting every day for survival. They fight every day to be able to just find medication for themselves. They don't need anything from different kind of people. All they want is just the opportunity to be able to see tomorrow, because these are people they left what they love. Some of them survived war. My family, my mother, giving birth on the way was not something easy for her. But for us, when we became refugees, we were happy. That was the second life for us.
And amidst all of that, the hardships, as you talk about, not having access to enough food, clean water, education being limited, yet it is in this environment that it came to you that you wanted to learn how to code. Tell me about how you discovered this love, this passion for coding.
Yeah, I really discovered the passion for coding because, first of all, as someone who was growing up, I've gone through so much, and especially being raised by my mother to work so hard to be able to buy for me a computer for 3 years and be able to do something for me that nobody, even that I never thought that she was going to be doing it, and living in a refugee camp with those circumstances. And to me, I really wanted to create something. I wanted to use my past and and to be able to create something that is going to be sustainable for other people. There are kids that grew up in a refugee camp. All they know is war. All they know is there's no way they can be able to sustain themselves. And to me, I really wanted to create something that, game that can bring them together, something they can be able to play, because games are very powerful tool that can bring communities together. To me, that's where I find my purpose. I want to create my experiences to be able to create something for people, to have empathy on refugees, to understand these refugees, they are people like us. They just need opportunities. They can become entrepreneurs. They can, make a world a better place, and to me, I took that opportunity knowing that living in the refugee camp was the only hope that I had. And I had to utilize all the things that I was aiming there. Like sometimes I would be happy every day, and people are like, "Why are you happy?" That's all I have. There's nothing else that I knew, and that helped me so much to work every day to go and learn how to code. Used offline tutorial, and today I'm making games. Not only game for refugees, but games that people are going to be playing. Yeah.
I mean, how the first game you created, and one that everyone talks about, is Salam, which means peace in Arabic, which has the players basically, I guess, take on the experience of a refugee, right, and experience that. Talk to me about how that game gained so much international attention, and really that's the game that was a springboard for you to leave the camp and make it to the States, correct?
Yes. Yeah, for sure. Because when I first created the game, in a refugee camp, we had no internet. We had no, there was no good internet. So I would use to send the first game that I made using Bluetooth and file sharing. And when I made Salam, it really caught the attention because there's a lot of game out there, and the industry has not seen game like this that bring people together, that help people to really understand what the power of game are, and to be able to use my experience is something like a diversity, because I feel like if we cannot be represented, then as refugees, then it's our responsibility to be able to create our product and create things that people are going to be interacting with. And that's where the diversity come from, because these are people, their voices have never been heard. And for me to put these experiences of refugee fleeing the war, this is just a game, something that has been there, something that has been a reality, using an experience of my mother to flee the country, looking for water and everything, to put it into a game. And that's why games are very powerful. And the industry was able to support me, and I'm here right now making, more game and be able to release the second version of Salam.
Wow. And I just want people to take stock of you spending most of your most of your life as a refugee to where we are now. You're talking to me from Washington, D.C. You are the CEO of your own company, Junub Games. I mean, when the few moments you have to stand back and look at your life, I mean, what goes through your mind when you think about this journey and where you are now in this place of success?
To me, first of all, I as a person, as a human, first of the thing is that I'm blessed to have a mother that really care for me more than the situation we're in. Second to that, I also think about, I knew I never had the privileges that a lot of people had, but I knew I was going to be okay. Because being refugees is not a burden to society. We are not a burden, So you just being placed into a place that is that as long as you focus, as you want to achieve something in life, it doesn't matter where you come from. And right now, I'm having my own company, you know, and I have people we're working with. I'm not just having a gaming company. We are bringing something new in the game industry, a new experience in the game industry, and being recognized in the industry and having a voice in the industry. It gives me so much hope that millions of refugees are like me. You know, they just didn't have the opportunity that I have. And it's also now my responsibility to create those, to be able to like bring more refugees into like the gaming industry or into like the tech industry. And that's something I'm doing right now. I'm training refugees in the refugee camp that I grew up in. During this COVID-19, you know, I gave them computers, and some of them right now are seated at home and learning from him. And those are not the opportunities that I had. But because I have this, I have to give back to them. And, you know, sitting on my chair and they're just doing work, having the internet and so on. So I feel like it gives me so much hope that humanity is always there, like that refugees can be able to achieve anything they can achieve in life, you know.
Yeah. I mean, that really leads me to my final question for you as we mark this year's World Refugee Day. What is your message? What is your message to the world?
Yeah, my message to the world is that, you know, if we really care about refugees, you know, we need to give them resources. And those resources are resources that are going to educate them, you know, because education is very important. You know, I would rather give them the tool that can actually help them understand their value in life. Because when these refugees flee their country, most of them are traumatized. Most of them don't know actually what is happening. But when you just give them the tool that let them understand, because for me, I wouldn't be here right now if I didn't have the tool to educate myself. And the same thing is happening again, you know. So if I meet with a very powerful two people today, you know, the first thing I would tell them is that, you know, refugees, the most important thing is for them to give them the tool to educate themselves. Because when you give them, you empower them, they can create whatever they want. You know, they can create job when they're living in the refugee camp. One thing I always tell people was when I started making game, my focus was not just to leave a refugee camp and come and make my own company. I started making game in a refugee camp. I started making my company when I was in a refugee camp. So I already had that. I already educated myself. So refugees deserve to be educated. They deserve to you know, to have better resources.
Well, Mayan, you are an incredible young man with an incredible inspirational story that I'm so proud I'm able to bring out to the world for this World Refugee Day. Thank you for being such a special soul and looking back to help other refugees. Thank you for that. And thank you for sharing your story today. Be safe,
Thank
Luel.
you for having me. Thank you.
I cannot wait to see what Luel Mayan does next. Before we go, I also want to give a shout out to Bendu, who has written in and shared her story of fleeing from Sierra Leone and arriving in the United States as a refugee. She now has a college degree and she's forging forward in her life. Congrats, Bendu. We're proud of you. Keep doing what you're doing. That's it for this special edition of Home with Isha Sesay. We hope you have found this show inspiring. We want to thank UNHCR for all their support in putting it together. I want to leave you with just a quick thought. And it's something that was inspired by a friend. You don't have to do everything. You don't have to do it all, but do what you can to help someone for as long as you can. Humanity deserves that. That's it. If you want to know how to help, go to the UNHCR website. They have all the information with some ideas for what you can do to make a difference. Thank you for joining us. Be safe, everyone. Thank you for watching.